2, possibly 3 firefighters backing the hose.
Tractors
so
here.
They don't get literally blown backwards.
Various tractors should be on parade slightly later. $35, $135, $220. Of course, the restored tractors are going up in price. BMC diesel. Leyland here as well, they're on $285. Massey Ferguson, of course, a major name in the tractor manufacturer. Cormac Farmer, 35X here.
What section? Go over to the emergency services vehicle section. Because I've been told they do like doing car washes. As you may have seen, quite often at fire stations,
Restored model there, International 444 here. 434. Oh, Turner there we are. Or see something different. Marshall 754. Marshall, which I think was taken over by Leyland, there we are. Dave Brown 25 and another T20.
We wouldn't have the show that we've got here at Cerney. And that goes for any of the shows
135. Leyland 344. Nuffield 344. Another Marshall 804. And various other models and makes here and the sizes over the decades. Paulson Major. And others here. Massey Harris.
The old box had every size of this. I think it'd be very interesting.
Something import there for 10. 135, 130 in the Massey Ferguson. Another import there. There's Chalmers there. 135. T20 restored and one that needs work. You can see. And the 35 there.
Now it's like stainless exhaust on it, I know.
There's Chalmers there.
That's a diesel work.
Fordson here. Going in the bridge shortly. Various tractors here. And enthusiasts. And we've got a bit John Deere here, major make now, of course, alongside Massey Ferguson. But of course, Massey Ferguson now made in France. In fact, no tractors are made in Britain anymore. Totally disgraceful. Leyland 255. Probably with a few parts, but that's what it. There we are. The decline in our manufacturing, unfortunately, over the decades. I should say probably. I was going to say post-war decades, certainly since the 70s or so. Cormac there. That's Ferguson 165. They're not very popular this day. 135 and the 165. You can see the size of those. Bigger farm needs there over the years. John Deere. Up over there and the farm over there where you can tell sizes and specifications over the years. Alston Dexter here, and next door we have the field marshal. You can hear the thud of the engine there. Nuffield, there we are, another Nuffield here. And we have next door military section. And David Brown, there we are, David Brown. Field Marshal Diesel there. And the Marshal.
toy-like, but they were very well made, very well engineered. Harry Ferguson was a stickler for
tractors
detail.
here.
The highest tensile bolts, the finest quality metal was used. That's the direct replacement. This is the grey and gold, the 35, launched in 1956. And although they were bad starters, the diesel engine, half the domestic production figures for that year, 1956, were that tractor. It was so popular. The 135 is the ultimate really version of the Ferguson concept, the new worldwide range of tractors launched in 1964 with the Perkins engine, about 47 horsepower. This is the 4-cylinder 35, so this is the next one on from the grey and gold, about 37 horsepower. Once you got the tractor starting, it was quite a good performer, that tractor, and it had double the amount of gears and more sophisticated hydraulics. David Brown, another great manufacturer, Meltham Mills near Huddersfield. They started making tractors with Harry Ferguson there in 1939, and that's one of the success stories. The 990, 40,000 of those were made from 1961 until 1965. Another Massey Ferguson, this is the ultimate version of the 35, the 44 horsepower 35X with all the extras on and the pre-cleaner sticking out of the bonnet. The highest horsepower British-built diesel tractor of its time, the 460, 60 horsepower. They bored the engine out on that, on the block, and the trouble was the liners were that much thinner, so they had cavitation problems. But a very, very good performer, very strong tractor. Another grey and gold, that had engine speed and ground speed power takeoff, and as well as position and draft flow hydraulics. The diesel Ferguson launched in 1951, and the first Ferguson with the 12-volt electrics. The Mark III Major launched in 1958, the Power Major with the Mark II engine tweaked to give 52 horsepower, and about 280 a day were being made at Dagenham at the peak of production until it was replaced by the Super Major. The Ford 2000, part of the worldwide range of tractors produced by Ford, and this is the basic tractor to replace the Dexter, and that's with the revised styling launched in 1968. The 3000 was the direct replacement for the Super Dexter, using Ford's own square design engine, so it had an equal design on the engine stroke and bore size, 47 horsepower. Quite a popular little tractor for a small to medium-sized farm. The 4000, what a looker, and that's just the tractor. 62 horsepower, that's a Ford 4000, and always the top seller of the range, as it was a direct replacement for the Super Major. The 5000, and that was the high horsepower tractor of its time for Ford. This is the Mark II version with 75 horsepower. Launched in 1968, the Ford Force range. And all of these belong to Mr. Webb. These are all of his tractors. He's collected the whole set. The 7000 was Ford's first turbocharged tractor, and that gave the tractor 97 horsepower from the 4-cylinder engine, and it's rare to see one with 4-wheel drive. The 165 was the direct replacement for the 65, about 60 horsepower and powered by a Perkins engine, and by this time Massey Ferguson owned Perkins, so they had their own in-house engine manufacturer. Now John Deere are one of the great names still, an independent company. This one was made in Germany at Mannheim. This is the 3-cylinder 710, and an interesting feature on that tractor is it's got 3 power takeoff shafts. So the mid-mounted one was very often used to power a mid-mounted mower. Massey Harris, a Canadian company who eventually amalgamated with Ferguson. This is a 744, so this is fitted with the Perkins P6 engine, and these were built in Peterborough by the company founded by Frank Perkins and Colin Chapman. Massive 7-bearing crankshaft on that. The High Major, launched in 1945 as a direct replacement for the Model N. Bit of a compromise model, as Ford didn't have much of a budget to develop a new tractor, so 70% of that tractor is still the Model N. The rear axle was the main difference. Marshall, well, this is a Leyland in fact, and rebadged because the production line was sent down to East Anglia. Charles Nickerson bought the Leyland tractor production line and started making them in Gainsborough in Lincolnshire. A Vendurve, a French tractor, about 25,000 Vendurves were made, and it's named after the town where the tractor is actually built, and they went into bed with Alice Chalmers. The 275 International, made at the old Jowett car factory in Bradford in the village of Idle. A lovely tractor, 35 horsepower, a long production run for that. My late father used to own one of those, and he thought the world of it. One of them made in Germany now at the Neuss plant. This is the D217, and that was designed for the European market in the sub 20 horsepower class. The direct replacement for the International 414 was the 434 with the 43 horsepower engine and the revised styling. Another 275 International, these were launched in 1959, and the production run went right the way up until 1970, and fitted with the rear-mounted cutter bar, finger bar mower. Another Massey Ferguson 35 now, and variants of this tractor are still being made in India, of all places, can you believe? And the tractor and farming equipment badging, but not with a Perkins engine. The 130 was made at Beauvais in France. It had an 8-speed gearbox and an indirect injection engine, and it wasn't as popular as the 135. But these 135s are really making big money now. One of these sold for £25,000 at the recent HJQ sale at Malvern. Good to see Andy Freeman, one of the Gloucestershire tractor mafia, back in circulation again. This is a David Brown 25. Andy's from Appley. 25,000 of those were made by David Brown from 1952 until 1957, and they were basically a down-rated crop master in terms of the tin work and what have you, but they did have weight transfer with the traction control unit. 444, again made at Bradford in the village of Idle, and that tractor production went right the way up until the early 1980s, and then that was another factory which closed. Note the basic cab on this tractor. These were becoming more and more common by the late 1960s, but with no soundproofing. So many tractor driver's hearing was impaired because there was no soundproofing, and that became a mandatory safety requirement from the mid-1970s onwards. A reminder too that Massey Ferguson also made industrial tractors for highway usage, and the MF20 is a classic design, probably used on gang mowers and highway maintenance, etc. And rare to see one actually, but it makes a change to see one. Note the flat top mud guards too. And this is a later 135 based Massey Ferguson because it's got the straight beam axle. One of the high ground clearance International Farmals now, and Farmals were made right from the 1930s onwards. This is a British built one in the Doncaster factory, which opened in 1949, and that's got the Savile Company badging on there, and they were a renowned international harvester dealer in the Stratford-upon-Avon and Hereford area as well. The high ground clearance and about 50 horsepower. Leyland, they were launched in 1969 as the offshoot from the Nuffield tractor range. The new range of tractors was the 154, the 344 and the 384. And talking of the 154, this is the third stage on of the BMC mini tractor, which basically came out of Harry Ferguson research. And it never really got the investment it needed. This tractor carried on right the way up until 1980 with very little modification. A 6-cylinder version of the 285, and this is kicking out 85 horsepower from a naturally aspirated tractor, 10-speed gearbox, and this is the Synchromesh gearbox, which was launched in about 1977, so you could change on the move. Ian Rodman now, nice to see Ian again from Gloucestershire with the Alice Chalmers D270, and that's fitted with a Perkins P3 engine and the primitive hydraulics on the back. A high ground clearance tractor, ideal for row crop work, ridging up potatoes, cultivating in between rows. Another Ford 3000 now, and when these first came out, they were badged as the Super Dexter to lure in potential buyers and to reassure people that Ford were still making a tractor which bared some sort of resemblance to what they bought before. Very capable little machine, dry drum brakes. The 4000 had the wet disc brakes. Another Ferguson now, and that's a TVO, and they were launched in 1949 because the fuel was getting more costly even in those days, so they had to have a cheaper brand of fuel to run them on. Nice to see John King's tractor here again, the 6-cylinder converted Fordson, and a tribute to the original gearbox and the rear axle, that it can take all that extra power. Ford never actually built their own 6-cylinder. They thought it would wear the tractor out in no time, but that didn't stop the tractor converters such as Roadless and County, and of course many a farm workshop, from doing that. A 135 now, and that's fitted with a nice little planter on the back, so you had somebody, two people sat on the back with some cabbages or some other plants, and the groove would be cut into the soil and they would just push them into the soil. I bought a B4 150, these were made at Doncaster for over 10 years, 50 horsepower tractor and an indirect injection engine, so you needed glow plugs to start it. Original international now, the 1020 Titan, about 78,000 of those were made, can you believe, ladies and gentlemen? 22 horsepower from a twin cylinder engine, and a lot of those came over in the First World War. The iconic Model N Fordson, 137,000 of those were made during the Second World War. That's a Harvest Gold model. They started to paint them green because they were too much of a target for the Luftwaffe. Ian Tandy now on a John Deere AR, a 1947 model, and John Deere went for twin cylinder engines. They carried that forward from the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company, Waterloo Boy tractor, and they didn't start making multi-cylinder engines until 1959.
I'm leaving the ring here.
Without this tractor, ladies and gentlemen, we wouldn't have won the war. It was absolutely critical, just as the Spitfire and the Hurricane were. This Model N Fordson was very, very crude, but it did 95% of the ploughing during the Second World War. Another B450 now, a very, very strong tractor. Look at the castings on this, about 50 horsepower, and the permanently live hydraulics with the pump being driven off the engine there. The 414 was an improved version of the 275 with extra horsepower, about 40 horsepower, an 8-speed gearbox, and the more sophisticated hydraulics. And I think they're one of the nicest looking internationals. The 135 now, and nice to see the milking bucket on there. Nice little artifact there, and it's Paul Johnson with a petrol version actually of the 135. That's a very rare tractor, and that was shipped in from the continent. A Morris Cowley now, and this was used in the Morris Works actually. They actually brought it back in and gave it a couple of gearboxes and tried to readapt it for wartime work because there was such a shortage of tractors at the time. The Nuffields were the tractor division of Morris Motors, and they were made from 1948 onwards, and that's one of the early universals, a very strong tractor with the adjustable sliding hubs. A roadless conversion of the Fordson Super Major, and with the Manuel Saline gearbox bolted directly to the gearbox, the transfer box, and giving the tractor extra grip. The High Major, the E27N, 27 horsepower, 234,000 of those were made from 1945 until 1952. The 35X, a beautiful tractor, probably one of the greatest ever Ferguson-derived tractors ever made, very collectible and still very capable. The Dexter was the direct competitor to that, launched in 1958 at the Alexandra Palace and the Smithfield Show, and it put Ford back to #1 in the sales figures. The Ford 7600, owned by Mr. David Ford, that's one of the later ones with the Power Plus engine, and that was like the last version of that tractor before it became the 7610. The basic Nuffield cab on there as well. That's another universal 4, and just a single ratio of gearbox speeds rather for that tractor. They gave it the 10 speed in 1964 with the 10 series. Another single cylinder Field Marshal, and a 2-stroke diesel, one big single cylinder with a 6.5 inch bore and a 9-inch stroke. The iconic Fordson diesel Major, that engine was adapted for use in all manner of things, compressors, generators, it even powered commercial vehicles. Another Alice Chalmers with a P3 conversion as well, and nice to see the basic tip cart as well. That's a very nice piece of equipment. And Alice Chalmers, they brought production facilities into Great Britain in the post-war period. They had a factory at Essendine in Lincolnshire. Prior to that, they were actually screwing them together in Southampton in kit form. And nice to see the root drill as well. The Fordson Power Major, 52 horsepower, the revised instrumentation, different scalloped wheels on it, and increased strength in the gearbox and the hydraulic lift. The Ford 4000 with the basic cab, which would have kept the rain off and kept the driver warm, but with no soundproofing whatsoever. A very, very popular tractor and a very common sight on most small to medium-sized farms. John King, nice to see a jock with his 6-cylinder conversion, and a reminder of the strength of the Fordson rear axle and the gearbox. The Super Dexter, as I say before, the second least powerful Ford 6X tractor, launched in 1964 at the new Basildon factory. And that factory is still making New Hollands to this very day. The Ford 6600, that was the direct replacement for the Ford 5000, 78 horsepower, and the Q cab fitted. That added £1,000 to the cost of the tractor actually at the time. The Marshall 754, well, by this time they put the production facilities up to Scunthorpe, and they were using Perkins engines by this time, so that's 75 horsepower and 4 cylinders. A tweaked version of the 804 was the 904, using the old Leyland 498 engine, turbocharged to produce 90 horsepower, and the Secura cab, which was a very comfortable place to work in. The 115 was launched in 1984 at the Smithfield show, and Marshall had high hopes for this tractor. It had a 6-cylinder Leyland engine, but sadly the writing was on the wall, and despite trying to resurrect a great British tractor manufacturer, they folded in the end, unfortunately. The David Brown Cropmaster, well, David Brown's first great success story. 60,000 of these were made from 1947 until 1952, and the first British manufacturer to have their own in-house diesel engine. That's a Gloucestershire tractor. That's a TVO version. The diesel was very, very popular. It had 4 sources of power: 2-speed power takeoffs, 2-speed belt pulley drive, a tow bar as well, and the hydraulic lift, all included in the price. The iconic 135, still a very capable tractor. That's one of the early ones with the backswept mudguards, a 1966 model. The International 1020, well, these were a highly regarded tractor of their time, in production from 1923 until 1940, and renewable wet liners on those tractors, and even roller bearings on the crankshaft, and supplied new by people like Aubrey Rees up the road. The diesel Ferguson was something that Harry Ferguson didn't really approve of, but he had to bow to it in the end, and that was produced with Freeman Sanders, a diesel engine manufacturer in Cornwall. The 185 was the high horsepower model to do battle with the likes of the Ford 5000, and that's fitted with multi-power, so you had a 30% increase in reduction in the speed of the tractor at the flick of a switch. Zetas are made in Czechoslovakia from the post-war period, and they're still going to this very day. And they offered a lot of equipment for a very, very good price. Osman Goering was the main importer of those in this area. The 8.8 David Brown Selectomatic, this was the replacement for the Implematic 880, and the new white colour scheme came in 1965. Another 6-cylinder model, and a reminder that the 6-cylinder conversion is very often used for tractor pullers using the Fordson rear axle and gearbox. TVO 35, by this time tractor vaporizing oil was getting less and less popular, but they did make a TVO version, and in 1949 the TVO TE20 was launched, and it was the most powerful of the range, actually, kicking in about 28 horsepower. Very safe tractor to drive, the Fergies, because the 5th selector position on the gearbox actually operated the starting solenoid, so you didn't start the tractor in gear. Another tractor conversion today, this is an 8-cylinder version of the Fordson Super Major, and again a tribute to the strength of that tractor. This is a contractor version of the Field Marshal with the canopy, and this is fitted with a Lanchbury winch, which was made just up the road at Kingham. And the contractors' models were very often fitted with a winch, and they were used as thrashing contractors' replacements for steam locomotives. The 35X with all the extras on it, differential lock, the uprated engine, a fantastic tractor for its time. Note the Lambourne cab on this particular tractor, just a basic frame with some cladding, but it kept the elements off, and there's a firm actually that still makes those cladding kits, which is good. Another 35 model now, this is a 4-cylinder version, and that's SWO 346, that springs to mind. That's a tractor I've known before. Nice to see the tip trailer behind as well. That would have carried about 3 ton. The Fordson Super Major was launched in 1961 as the Mark IV Major with the revised siling and the dry disc brakes. A mid-1990s John Deere now, a 4-cylinder model owned by the Hartel family from Tewkesbury, and you can see how things have progressed with 4-wheel drive, quiet cabs. It's got the assister rams so that the tractor can pick up even more heavier equipment, but still with a 4-cylinder engine that's been turbocharged for more power. The 275, if you buy one of these, always check that the glow plugs are working well on it, because if they are not, it won't start, and then you wear the starter out, and then you start using Easy Start, and then you've got to repair the engine. The 65 was launched in 1957 at the Smithfield show as Massey Ferguson's high horsepower tractor to do battle with the likes of the Fordson Major, and it was a highly successful tractor using the 35's rear axle and the Perkins engine. The equal size County 4-drive Power Major tractor. County were a great tractor converter from Andover in Hampshire, the Tapp brothers, and they took the drive off the ball pinion shafts